When we approach the month of Muharram, many of us would look at the rewards that are available, that are spoken about, to do with Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein, and we think to ourselves, how can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give a man that much reward for his sacrifice? How is it that everything to do with Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein is magnified in merits, magnified in acceptance, magnified in the speed in which Allah accepts it? And it's all encompassing, it's all forgiving, it's all merciful. Amongst the many traditions that we have, the ones that come and say, if a person was to cry a tear the size of the wing of a fly, that Allah will wipe oceans of sin. Someone will come and will, hold on, that tear is shed for who? Hussein. Who is this Hussein? Why this particular Hussein? So I want to mention a particular story which is quite famous, in which a person that was a Shia marja had the same question. When he comes across a particular tradition that states that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will look towards the zawar of the grave of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein with the eye of mercy before he looks towards the Hajj in Arafah. So he's thinking, hold on. He's thinking, if I was to go towards Abu Abdullah on the day of Arafah, I could live next door, I could be 10, 20, 30 kilometers away and just go towards Abu Abdullah very easily. And that person's going to Hajj. He's saved up for his entire life, in many cases, that he's performed all those rituals over strenuous days and nights in that particular area and performed all that he has to perform. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would look towards the zawar of Abu Abdullah before he looks towards the Hajj in Arafah. So it doesn't make sense to him. So he goes on a journey in which he looks at the different aspects. He's looking at the hadith in itself. He's looking at the chain of narrators. He's looking at the content in itself. He's finding any way in which he can say that this particular hadith isn't as strong as we think it is. But every time he does his research, he says, no, everything is perfect. The chain is perfect. The content is perfect. The wording is perfect. Everything has its value. However, it doesn't make sense to me. I can't comprehend the fact that Allah would look at the eye of mercy towards the visitors of the grave of Abu Abdullah before the Hajj in Arafah. So he does something that is very well known amongst the scholars of the time. This Sayyid that was a marja goes towards Masjid al-Sahla. As a well-known practice, if you go towards Masjid al-Sahla 40 Tuesdays in a row and you have a question, without a doubt you'll see one of Allah's people that will guide you towards what you are willing or what you are seeking. So the marja said to himself that I'm going towards Masjid al-Sahla 40 Tuesdays in a row in order for me to get the answer to my question. Sufficed enough that I feel it within my heart that yes, it's correct, that yes, Allah will look towards the visitors of the grave of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein before the Hajj in Arafah. So he sets on a journey where he goes every single Tuesday, prays what he needed to pray, asks Allah to see one of his people in order for him to get the answer that he needs. So you'll find it came towards the 40th Tuesday, which coincidentally happened to be the Tuesday of Sha'ban, whereby he could have attained, had he gone towards Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein, the rank of a Sha'baniyun, where they go visit the grave of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. And that's why we have a tradition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment will say, Aina Sha'baniyun, and they will bring forward the people that perform this particular act. So he says, I can go another time. Next year, I need to answer my question first. So on the 40th Tuesday, he goes in, performs his prayers, waiting to see someone to ask him to get clarification, to get the knowledge that he needed in order for him to understand the depths of this particular tradition, signifying the place of Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein. So on that particular Tuesday, he's waiting, nothing happens. So you'll find the Sayyid becomes very upset that he didn't get the answer that he needed. So he took himself from Masjid al-Sahla towards Masjid al-Kufa to pray. And he prayed in Masjid al-Kufa. Whilst he's in Kufa, this is where it gets interesting. Whilst he's in Masjid al-Kufa, as he's praying, and you can understand that the marja was upset at that particular stage, that he didn't get the answer that he wanted, that he spent 40 weeks coming towards Masjid al-Sahla to attain an answer. So a man that had the Arabic dress code came and sits next to this particular Sayyid. So he says to him, as a marja', you see many people come forward and they begin to ask questions and they say stories or they tell him of incidents that occurred to them. So the Sayyid being the marja', this man comes towards him wearing what the traditions say as the dress codes of the Arabs of the time. And he would come next to the Sayyid and tell him, I want to tell you a story. And the Sayyid, he's half listening to this man, he's half not, because he was still thinking about the issue that he had in hand. So the man, after he is trying to talk to the Sayyid, says, oh man, I want to tell you a story. So the Sayyid says, what's the story? He says, there was a king. This king went out with his men for a hunt. When he found the hunt, he chased it by himself. And as his horse took him in towards the deserts, his men were left behind and he was separated from them. Whilst he's in the desert, he said he's looking for someone, for a sign. He sees a tent in the outskirts. So he comes closer towards the tents. And while he's saying the story, he's looking at the Sayyid. He says, Sayyid, are you listening? The Sayyid would say yes. So he'd go on to say that he saw a tent and he approached the tent. He saw a lady standing in front. So the man comes off his horse, the king, and he says to the lady, what's going on here? He says that I live here with my son. This is what we have, is a tent and a sheep that's tied on the back of the tent. My son goes out to hunt. If he catches, that we are fed. But if he doesn't, we take the milk from the sheep and it suffices us. So the king, as he sat in the tent, the son arrives. When he arrives, he sees it's a king. You can see the signs of royalty. So as he saw the king that's inside, he says, I can't give him milk. So what he does is he sacrifices the only thing he had, which was that sheep that was feeding them. And he placed it, after he cooked it, in front of the king. And at that moment, he would tell the Sayyid, Sayyid, are you listening? And the Sayyid would say, yes, I'm listening. So he goes on to say, when the king saw this, he says that you've sacrificed the sheep for me. He goes, yes. He goes, that's all you have. He goes, indeed, that's all we have. But we need to make sure we've given it to you because you're from royalty. We know that what you are accustomed to. So the king stands up and says, yes, indeed, I am royalty and I am the king from this particular area. If you need anything, come towards me. Understandably, that this boy and his mother only had the sheep a few days and he went towards the king. Again, he tells him, Sayyid, are you listening? And says, yes. So the man enters the palace and the king sees him enter and he looks at his men. He says, oh men, this is the boy that I've told you about, that he sacrificed his sheep for me. So he looks around the room and he tells them, what do you think is appropriate to give him in return? So he says, amongst them, one of them would say, for example, this many gold coins. Another one would say, give him this many sheep in return for that one sheep that he gave. Another would say land, another. The king would turn around and all his men and says, all of you are unjust. They say, what do you mean? He says, it's not about what he gave in its quantity. It's about what he gave in its quality. They would say, what do you mean? It was just a sheep. He goes, no. The principle is that he gave towards me everything he had. It's only just if I give everything that I have to them. Again, the man looks at the Sayyid. He says, Sayyid, are you listening? He goes, I heard you. But what's the gist of the story? What's the gem of the story? The man looks at the Sayyid and says, oh Sayyid, Abu Abdullah gave everything towards Allah subhanahu. The man in the story had one sheep. Abu Abdullah, what did he have? He had one Akbar, gave it towards Allah. He had one Abdullah, 6-month-old, gave it towards Allah. He had one Abbas, gives it towards Allah. And he says, take until you're sufficed. He says, oh Sayyid, Hussain gave everything towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you think that Hussain is more generous? Oh Allah, it's Allah. He says, then why do you think that it's hard that he looks towards the visitors of his grave before the people that are waiting in him? Let's take that message and understand it very well. What is available for each and every one of us within this holy month of Ramadan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors Imam Hussain in such a rank that anyone that even calls himself a servant of Abu Abdullah. Look at how he raises their ranks, how he raises their name, how he raises his sum'ah amongst the people. And that's just calling themselves the servant of Abu Abdullah. Let's take this into perspective and try our utmost to hold on to this rope of Abu Abdullah Hussain from this Muharram until next one, inshallah.